Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers. I'm looking at a book by Professor K D Ewing. It's called Bonfire of the Liberties. You can see a picture of it here. It's in a paperback. This is the Flickr review. My wife Elizabeth and I have written a review and we've given it the title All Fired Up for Change in 2010. The subtitle of this little paperback is New Labour, Human Rights and the Rule of Law. Now, in my view, it's essentially a political book rather than anything else, but it does actually look at what has been going on for the last 13 years. The book is rightly subtitled, as I say, New Labour, Human Rights and the Rule of Law, all of those areas being very much associated in the past with intellectual socialist ideals, rather than what has actually happened, which is pragmatic New Labour policies. What Hewing does is he describes with examples the erosion of our civil liberties since 1997. It starts ominously with his statement, "We live in a society where the police have more power, where we are watched and monitored more closely and more often, and which our ability to speak out and protest is subject to more and more restraints." Well, that's exactly what has happened if you look at the history of the last 13 years of the Labour government. It's a damning indictment of New Labour, and in fact many will feel that, I certainly do, if ever there was one, frankly. And what K D Ewing has done is he says what many people will in fact not share his views, although what he says is at best they may share the concerns, and that really sums up the worth of this work, because it is the concern which I think a lot of people feel. I certainly saw that as a candidate in the 2010 elections. It's a collection of statements on areas of the law which affect the direct relationship between the state and its people, with worrying conclusions. There are 8 chapters in this paperback, 300 pages, covering all the usual liberty issues, and there's a useful list of cases and some statutes. It's, in my view, very readable and something which all MPs ought to read, especially the new intake from 2010. And probably the single most important theme is the erosion of the individual rights by the state. And what K D Ewing does, he backs up each topical issue with breathless detail to justify the assertions made. He also knows a few of the tricks about reviews, because he says that normally only the introduction and the conclusion of most books are read. This book, in our view, however, is different, because the wealth of detail on what can be termed abuses by the state are well worth reading in detail throughout. The final conclusion, right at the end, covers power, not rights, and appears to be a veiled criticism of the human rights business, as I call it, and the deliberate ineffectiveness of judicial review, which is merely seen as a sop to the public as far as some are concerned, i.e. the people who are running things and don't want to be found out. The problem with the book, though, is that when one reads it, one seems to go round in circles all the time, rather like the Bonfire, not knowing whether the thing is completely out of control or not. So the lasting legacy of Bonfire of the Liberties will hopefully be the way out of the current Liberties mess with parliamentary reform. Hopefully we will have a great reform bill at the end of 2010 for implementation in 2011. That may assist. The problem, however, remains with the international economic crisis taking pole position as a top agenda item of today, although the erosion or corrosion of civil liberties and the constitutional slide will need addressing as a matter of some urgency in the short term if we remember our interwar history properly. Hewing offers useful steps, in our view, which can be taken to restore some semblance of the balance between the loss of rights and a consecutively aggressive series of executives. Obviously that was what highlighted both Blair and Brown's years in power. The work is rightly a 2010 definition account of the struggle for civil liberties as a new parliament meets this year to seek to curb executive power if they can and implement some of the reforms on offer, and obviously the coalition could well do that. Hewing is clearly trying to douse the lack of liberties fire which still seems to be out of control, and it's a useful commentary in our view on the parlour state of today's rights, which will be viewed with interest in a couple of years' time, we hope. Thank you very much to Professor Hewing and OUP. Bye-bye.